Hey guys, everything new under the sun. So I was able to get my Yeti microphone working. I'll probably do a video on it because there's a lot of people out there having the same issue as me. And basically the short answer is I plugged a 3.5 millimeter jack into the monitor port of it, and I'm using the built-in input on the back of the iMac. And because if you put headphones on, it works completely fine. But anyways. If you're watching this in a year and you could care less about the Yeti, then this means nothing to you. Into the content of the day. This is part 6, I believe, in the series. Let's just see. I have the series pulled up here. Yes, part 6. So you can see Ancient Book of Enoch, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I've got a playlist basically that's associated to this, and I'm basically going through, chapter by chapter, line by line, looking at it, adding my input, my commentary on it where I think it's necessary, and we're seeing a lot of quite interesting things, even at a preliminary, high level view of a reading of the text, a cursory reading of the text, I guess you'd say. So we're going to do part 6 here, and part 6 does kind of, it absolutely does follow along where we ended off in part 5, speaking of the millennial reign of Christ. But first things first, so this is the Ancient Book of Enoch. It is a book by Ken Johnson, who is a theologian, and this is an ebook that, PDF, whatever. You're seeing the image from the Kindle reader, effectively, where it's downloaded to. I think it's $9.99 on Amazon to purchase it. So definitely support Ken Johnson. He's done good work putting this book together. He has some commentary here and there associated to it, and he does good work. So definitely support it. But you can buy this as well. Read through it yourself. We're going to be starting in, I think, chapter 28. And so, like I say, we've just read about the tree of life, and basically it seems like Enoch is being taken along with these angels, and he seems to be in the millennial period. And I don't see a lot of commentary suggesting that, but as I read it, that's kind of what I'm seeing. So let's try to get over here. Enoch's Journey. I have to skip a few pages ahead here. So this was all part 5. So definitely check that out. Check the whole playlist. You can watch it. You can binge watch it if you want. Part 1 to part 6 or 7 or 8 or however many parts I have here, or I will have. Basically, I'm adding a part every Sunday, sort of in place of my longer prophecy update, which I should probably get back to, and I will. But anyways, this speaks of the tree of life here, and that's what we read. And again, it's speaking about the land of Israel, about how beautiful it is, and it's blessed and it's fruitful, and just the headers and the commentary, I'm not seeing that anything about this speaks of the millennial period, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And as I read it, I think, more and more, this does look like he's being basically drawn through, looking at the world as it is during the millennial reign of Christ, in where God effectively brings everything back to the way it was. It's a perfect world. There's no one, it's not perfect, but it's a world brought back to the Garden of Eden, like prosperity. All the plants and animals are huge, and nothing's extinct anymore, and it's a beautiful, prosperous place where there's no war because Jesus is reigning with us, kings and priests for the Lord, and it's 1,000 years where all the non-believers, the mortals, remember we speak of it, we're the immortals during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, serving Jesus as king, as kings and priests ourselves below him, and leaders over the immortals. So it's going to go back to, just like the myths, the Greek myths I'm thinking of, where we have these gods and the mortals and the immortals. But in this case, it's corrected. Originally, it started out with the immortals being what God did not want. And it's completely flipped around here, which is, as I think about it, that's another interesting thing, that the millennial period is actually the correction, the flipping of the immortals and the mortals. The immortals in biblical times, in the ancient days, and spoken of in Greek myth, is when the Nephilim came down. The angels slept with the women of men and had babies, and that's where you get the Greek gods, like Hercules and Zeus and all these sorts of things. And that was the bad example. That was the reversed, incorrect example. And then in the millennial period, you're going to have the immortals, the gods, they would label them effectively. But you and I, the saved, those who have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, in the 6,000 years, which we're in right now, getting very near to the end of it, about 15 years to go, I think 13 years to go. Watch my video on the timeline of the return of the Lord. Speaks of the 6,000 years, and the Gregorian should be based off the death of Christ, which puts the year at about 1984, 85. And so to the year 6,000, we only have about 14 years or whatever. Check that. That's a whole other video. Anyways, it's completely reversed. So, where the gods, in the Greek myths were bad and ruling over with an iron fist in a bad way, the mortals, in those legends, which I think there's the Bible definitely backs them up, as does Enoch and Jasher, the book of Jasher, etc. I'm going to pause this video actually and check the audio, make sure the audio is still working here. All right, so the audio is working. So in the millennial reign of Christ, it's going to be corrected, and God's going to kind of flip the tables, and all the people who accepted Jesus Christ prior to the end of the 6,000 years, prior to the Great Tribulation, will get to rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years on earth. And so that will be a chance for the mortals at that point to choose God or not choose him. And we know there's going to be a whole pile that are not going to choose him, and that are, even though it's pretty almost a perfect world, and there's no war, and people are living to like 500, 1,000 years, etc. Still, they're going to reject God. But that's an interesting point. And the text here doesn't suggest that we're moving on from the tree of life and these sorts of things. It also doesn't suggest that it's a millennial reign that they're kind of talking about. But to me, it seems like it is. This is kind of the heaven on earth, the millennial reign period that they're talking about. All right, so I'm going to start in chapter 28 here, and we'll read through it, and you can think about that. And put your Jesus goggles on, and listen through the lens of the Bible, I guess, if you want to say it that way, and see where it sort of makes sense, sort of parallels the Bible, agrees with the Bible, or where I guess the Bible would agree with it. And I think we're in for some interesting things to read here. So I'll start reading. From there I went toward the east, in the midst of the mountain range of the desert. I saw a plain. It was full of trees of the seed, and water gushed forth from above. A strong stream flowed toward the north and toward the west. It caused clouds and dew to ascend on every side. I'll zoom down here. From there I went to another place. Go over here so you can see it. My face is probably in the way. From there I went to another place from the desert and approached to the east of the mountain range. Again, this whole thing is connected. All these chapters are connected. So I think we're still in the millennial reign, like I say. And he's being drawn around and showing the vision of what it's like in the millennial reign period, where you have the tree of life sitting there. And that's what the immortals are allowed to eat from. That's why we continue to be immortal on earth. So that's pretty cool. That's amazing stuff. There I saw a tree of judgment giving off the fragrance of frankincense. Let me zoom up here. And myrrh. And the trees were not like ordinary trees. These trees were right under the highest point in the eastern mountain range. Beyond these, I went far away to the east, and I saw another place, a valley full of water that does not dry up. Again, it's a blessed area, and it's a rebuilt earth, I guess, and God is preserving it, and so everything is beautiful and fragrant and plentiful. And it's an amazing place to be living. That's what the vision is that he is representing here. In there was a beautiful tree. Its fragrance was such as the mastic. On the sides of those valleys I saw fragrant cinnamon, Then I proceeded beyond these to the east. I saw other mountains, and among them were groves of trees, and there flowed forth from them nectar, which is called storax and galbanum. Beyond these mountains I saw another mountain to the east of the ends of the earth, whereon were aloe trees, and all the trees were full of hard substance, being like almond trees. When one burned it, it smelled sweeter than any fragrant odor. You see all this, flowery terminology, fragrance, and all these beautiful things that he's seeing. Again, and this seems to be on Earth, because he's kind of traveling around to different places on Earth and seeing these things. And this, it adds up more and more that this is speaking of the millennial reign, and we're getting an inside look at what it's going to be like during the millennial period. It's pretty neat stuff here. Now it starts talking about the Garden of Eden. So will there be a Garden of Eden again during the millennial period? It kind of makes sense that there will be. Well, I guess if the tree of life exists, then the tree of life is in the Garden of Eden. It makes sense that it will be in there again. So, by definition, it makes sense that the Garden of Eden, would be there and accessible for the immortals. You and I, if you've accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, and you should tonight if you have not, you and I will be able to eat it if you're saved. If you're mortal, you don't have access to that. So I guess the angels are going to be guarding it or whatever. The angels guarded it. 2 angels with swords. It was a cherubim or whatever in Genesis. After these fragrant odors, I looked toward the north over the mountains. I saw 7 mountains full of choice nard, fragrant trees, cinnamon, and pepper. From there I went over the summits of all these mountains, far towards the east, and passed above the Erythraean Sea, and went far from it, and passed over the angel Zotiel. And I came to the garden of righteousness, Eden. I saw from afar off trees more numerous than these trees, and 2 great trees there, very beautiful, glorious, and magnificent. The tree of knowledge, whose holy fruit they ate, and knew great wisdom. That tree is in the height like the fir, and its leaves like the carob tree, and its fruit is like grapes, very beautiful, and the fragrance of the tree penetrates afar. So again, in this millennial period, it seems like our senses are heightened, and that makes a lot of sense. If God gives us immortal bodies, He gives us new bodies that work like He intended them to work, immortal, as an example. It makes sense that we have heightened senses. So are the trees giving off more fragrance? Probably that's the case. It says that. But also probably we are able to sense, smell in, so many more dimensions and so much more strongly, and we're so much more sensitive. And this is all part of being in heaven. I think having bodies that can sense like God originally intended us. Right now we're mere shadows of what God really intended for our bodies. We are weak. We are desperate. We are sinful. We are failing. Our bodies fail so quickly. Less than 100 years and we're dead. Whereas in Genesis, people were living upwards to 1,000 years old. And that's what God originally intended us to live forever. But even in Genesis, even with sin in Genesis, because the gene pool was so clean still, they were living to near 1,000 years. What was it? Methuselah was 969 years old. And I've done videos on the lifespans of these as well, so you can check that out. Or ask me questions, and I'll definitely get you the answers. Anyway, so it makes sense that, fragrance and all this kind of stuff would be multiplied hundreds of times, and maybe that is what he's basically describing. It says, Then I said, how beautiful is the tree, and how glorious to look upon it. Then the angel Raphael, who was with me, answered me and said, This is the tree of wisdom, of which your old father and your aged mother, Adam and Eve, in brackets, who were before you have eaten, and they learned wisdom, and their eyes were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they were driven out of the garden. Again, this is a very telling, interesting detail. Is it a made-up book, and he's just making something up because he read the Bible, and so he's making up his own book? Enoch, that is. It could be, but he has so much more detail in here that it seems like there's more to it than just him dreaming. And this is interesting. It's a tree of wisdom, of which your old father, interesting terminology again, I don't know how it was translated, and your aged mother. There's probably specific meaning to those terms. Why didn't it just say old father and old mother? Interesting, something to look into. And of course, it confirms that what the Bible says, that Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and their eyes were opened, and figuratively, they recognized right from wrong. They were innocent before that. Nothing they could do was wrong because they didn't know what was wrong. They didn't know the definition of wrong. Wrong meant nothing to them. The word probably was not even in their vocabulary. But as soon as they ate this, they had knowledge like God, and they knew good and evil. And at that point, then they had the option to choose to sin. And of course, you know what happened from there. So they were driven out of the garden at that point. Now, prior to the flood, and this gets into constellations, prior to the flood, if you believe that there was a water canopy, that makes a lot of sense, because there was no rain in that time. And they had big stories about the constellations, the stars. It seems like they could see them more clearly. If you had a water canopy, which it could have been effectively like a big, I should back up. The water canopy is like a whole bunch of water around the atmosphere, really thick, basically of all the water, because the water crashed down in the flood of Noah. Where did all the water come from? Some came from the great deep, from springs, and other water came down. So was there a protective water coating or ice coating around the earth? And Kent Hovind, for example, suggests that that water canopy effectively acted like a magnifying glass, and also allowed there would be no clouds, I guess, in Adam and Eve's time, because there was no rain, and clouds are water droplets, obviously. That means they would have had an absolutely pure, clear view of all the stars. So they knew it, and the stars were so much brighter than they are now. Now they're just dim up in the sky. You can't even make them out. You can't, if we see the brown shining of Mars, we think that's great. But back in that day, they probably saw it. They saw the planets probably huge, massively closer. They looked closer because it would have acted like a magnifying glass, and they would have shone brightly and brilliantly and very sharply. It would have been as if we're looking through the Hubble telescope at everything. They would have been able to see all that. Not to mention their eyes would have been more sensitive, which they will have better eyes as well. We'll probably be able to see radio frequency in the millennial period. We'll have incredible bodies that God intended us to have originally. And so he starts talking about the constellations here, and just keep that in mind. It's an interesting conjecture, basically. From there I went to the ends of the earth and saw great beasts there, and each differed from the other. And I saw birds also differing in appearance and beauty and voice. So we see the creativity and diversity that God has created in the animal kingdom on earth. To the east of those beasts I saw the ends of the earth, whereon the heaven rests, and the constellations of the heaven open. I saw how the stars of heaven, sun and moon, come forth, and I counted the constellations out of which they proceed, and wrote down all their gates of each individual star by itself, according to their number and their name. So back in these days, they knew the number and the name of all the stars. We hardly know, what the moon is these days, because stuff is just so dim, and we have to wait for a clear sky, etc. They didn't have to do that back in the day. It was very clear. Their courses and positions, so they were very smart, and they monitored the course and positions back in the pre-flood times, effectively, because that's when Enoch was around. And their times and months, as Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, showed me. So this is going to be in the millennial period. Apparently, it seems as if we're going to be able to see these stars again in that way. Will there be another water canopy? If God's going to rebuild it like it was prior to the flood, we could see that again. And that's, again, a very interesting thought. We're going to find out effectively what it was like prior to the flood. He showed me all these things and wrote them all down for me, their names, laws, and operations. From there I went toward the north to the ends of the earth, and there I saw great and glorious wonder at the ends of the whole earth. There I saw 3 portals of heaven open in heaven. Through each of them proceed north winds. When they blow, there is cold, hail, frost, snow, dew, and rain. Out of one portal they blow for good, but when they blow through the other 2 portals, it is with violence and affliction on the earth, and they blow with violence. So, portals to other dimensions, that seems like what it's suggesting there. Yeah. From there I went toward the west, to the ends of the earth, and saw there 3 open portals as I had seen in the east, the same number of portals, and the same number of outlets. From there I went to the south, to the ends of the earth, and saw there 3 open portals of heaven. Out of them come dew, rain, and wind. From there I went to the east, to the ends of the heaven, and saw here the 3 eastern portals of heaven open, and small portals above them. So lots of portals to other dimensions, it seems like. And so in this time, there seems to be lots of, we're going to see lots of supernatural things. It's not just going to be a millennial reign rebuilt like Eden. We're going to have a lot more insight into all the extra dimensions that God has, and likely the immortals will be able to pass in and out of those. Why wouldn't we be able to do that at that point? So that is pretty interesting stuff. Through each one of these small portals pass the stars of heaven and run their course to the west on the path which is given to them. As often as I saw, I blessed always the Lord of glory, and continue to bless the Lord of glory, who has wrought great and glorious things, to show the greatness of his work to the angels and the spirits of men, that they might praise his work in all his creation, that they might see the work of his might and praise the great work of his hands and bless him forever. So at this point in time, we'll be able to see the incredible awesomeness of the universe he created, because it will be rebuilt like it was. We'll be able to see the constellations. We'll have these rebuilt bodies that have all the extra senses, and we'll be able to experience things like Enoch and Noah and all these other people that Adam and Eve prior to the flood. That is pretty cool stuff. All right, chapter 37. This is the second vision of wisdom of Enoch, son of Jared, son of Mahalalel, son of Canaan, son of Enos, son of Seth, son of Adam. The very first words of wisdom from the Holy One that I wish to tell those who dwell on earth, the men of old time and those who will come after. It would be better to declare it only to the men of old time, but I will not withhold wisdom from those who come after. Never before has the Lord of spirits given such wisdom. He also gave me my insight and eternal life. So Enoch had eternal life, and he walked with God. He was actually raptured. The Lord of spirits gave me 3 parables to tell to those who dwell on earth. And so it's specifically stating that the parables that are next, I'm not going to read those, but the parables that are next were specific to give to those who dwell on the earth. We'll just take a sneak peek. So we're going to get into the parables here, and so this should be some interesting discussion as well. But again, I think this whole last section really speaks of the millennial reign of Christ and what the world will look like at that point in time. I would say read through it again, with those goggles through which you read this, being that this could very well be describing the millennial period and the portals that are open, the great and wonderful trees and signs and animals, and the rebuilt planet, the amazing, glorious rebuilt planet that God has, the Garden of Eden, the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. All these things are spoken of here, and I think they're all going to be available just like they were prior to the flood. I think God has that all designed in. I think he even knew that the gods would come down, sleep with the women of men, and have sons and have these gods, because he then just is going to flip that right over on its head in the millennial reign of Christ. So I will leave it there. That is your Enoch update, part 6, I believe it is. Check it out on Amazon by Ken Johnson. And let me go back to the cover here, so you can get it if you're intrigued. Get it, support Ken Johnson, and it's only $10. And I will leave it there, guys. That's a lot to chew on. I need to ponder this, think about it. But I think it's going to be very exciting. I can't wait. That's an understatement, obviously. I can't wait for the Lord to come back, and for there to be peace on earth, and to be able to witness the millennial reign of Christ on earth, and to see what the earth looked like prior to the flood, and some really interesting nuggets of information about what it could be like during that period. So again, I will leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. Please let me know if you like this. Give me the thumbs up and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks, and we will see you guys in the next video.